And now back to your regular programming.
If you speak better to yourself.
You showed up for probably the dumbest conversation we've ever had on this show.
Let's have that smile again.
Tell me how that happens. Physically should not happen.
Relax.
If you say
Give me as well.
3 times a day, God will line it up.
He's just an absolute hack, and he gets his ass kicked by the teammates every week. It's just terrible.
Welcome back to Hack City. I'm Joe DeLeone. With me is my co-host Sean Anderson, 2 former college football players from the University of Rhode Island. Sorry, trying to find my pen. Today we're reacting to Week 7. I always have to have something. I almost said I always have to have something in my hands. I still ended up saying it. It's midnight. Week 7 lived up to the hype. All of these big premier games, except for Texas, Oklahoma, were batshit freaking crazy. We've got a lot to get to. We're going to recap what just happened between Ole Miss and LSU, probably off the top because it's the freshest thing off the dome. The bonkers decision-making by Ohio State in the Oregon game, more specifically, Will Howard. Ooh, we got a lot to talk about with Will Howard. Of course, we're going to get to Alabama's struggles with South Carolina. We're going to get to the Red River shootout that ended up being the Red River blowout. Not even close. All that coming up and more. Before we get there, Sean, can you tell our listeners where they can bet if they lost a lot of money listening to our picks this week?
Oh, yeah. The jinx was back in a big way today. Sean Anderson calling his shot, missing bets, but I won some at BetOnline. It's the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for everything sports betting, every stat, matchup, breakdown, even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. If I had a hunch today, it didn't matter. I wasn't hitting it. If I said something out loud, the opposite happened.
By the way, that is not even a joke. Sean, in the final series for South Carolina, Alabama, he says out loud, no way South Carolina goes down here and scores. And they marched down and scored. And then you said something else. I forget what it was.
I was all over the place.
There were a string of things that you said that came to fruition with such declarative confidence that were it was an unreal run.
Yeah,
it was.
It was impressive. Just trying to talk ball, and
Horrible.
it was awful. Hey, you also had a little jinxie going on today. Also, Mr. Nick Harbor with a big touchdown. Regardless, BetOnline.
Criticizing him.
BetOnline is where you need to go. They've got the largest catalog of odds for everything football, MLB playoffs, NHL, NBA, political props. When the game's over, they got the online casino with the blackjack, the poker, the slots. 150 of those games, by the way. Head to the website today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here.
All right, Sean, we're going to start off. Ole Miss versus LSU. Ole Miss, they stumble in overtime. Looked like they were going to be able to win this game. Typical fashion here, Sean. A situation where we feel like Lane Kiffin got the game in hand. He overthinks the hell out of the outcome. He overthinks the decision-making. So many weird, questionable decisions allows for LSU to hang around, and tie the game, and then eventually win the game in overtime. I'm very perplexed with this game, with the way that they performed in overtime, to the degree where there was the multiple penalties, there were multiple mistakes. It ends up a 2nd and 25. And instead of trying to cut down on the amount of space that they have to cover, they take multiple shots. I think that weird series of plays into what we're talking about here with the way that Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss completely bungled a clear opportunity to win this football game. They ended up hitting the field goal. So it's kind of a non-factor here not a non-factor, but they ended up hitting the field goal. They could have, if they tried to chip away, put themselves in a position to try and get that first down. But instead, again, trying to score on a 2nd and 3rd and 1,000,000 yards. And then immediately getting dunked on by Garrett Nussmeier as soon as their turn on offense happened. Terrible, terrible way to finish for Ole Miss. They're out of the playoff conversation for me. I don't see a way that they're going to be able to finish the season strong enough that they're going to have a resume with worse or better than 3 losses.
I'm so sick of the Ole Miss antics, and I've been saying it all year. And this show, historically, has been very pro Lane Kiffin. And we have been defenders of him. We stood by him. I like that he stayed at Ole Miss. He has an energy and charisma as a college football coach that I like. But the antics in the games, I'm over it. I'm over getting bailed out, having Lane and his team bailed out by I'm not a statistician, Joe, but I would figure this is the first 57-yard field goal made in overtime at LSU in a night game. It has to be. To get bailed out.
I'd love to check that.
By that golden leg
Wouldn't
of
that make
luck.
you a historian, not a statistician?
A sports historian then, regardless.
Okay.
It's the antics. It's the mess. It's the crazy decisions all game. It's letting Jackson Dart take brutal hit after brutal hit. He gets up, picks himself up by his work boots, goes 3 and out, goes back out the next drive, takes another ridiculous shot right to his chest. The Ole Miss situation, it's run its course. This is as good as it last week was as good as they're going to be. They're not better than beating Kentucky by 24 points, and they're not worse than losing to LSU in an overtime game. They're not going to be a CFP contender. They're not going to make legitimate noise, but they can be fun and scrappy. I'm tired of the expectation with them. Done with it.
This whole game was just a total folly of mishaps for Ole Miss, as I said earlier. If you look at the way that LSU just on paper performed, Garrett Nussmeier, if I told you that Garrett Nussmeier had a huge throw to tie the game and then win the game to Kyron Lacey, if I told you that and then told you his stats, you would tell me I'm on crack. 22 of 51 for 337, three touchdowns and 2 interceptions. That's the stat line of a player who's in a game that's down 30 points and is desperately trying to climb back in, and they're just throwing it every single play.
Yeah.
They couldn't run the ball. They only mustered 84 yards on the ground. It actually legitimately felt like Ole Miss outperformed them with how dominant that they were on defense. They allowed all those big yards and big plays in what felt like the fourth quarter. They allowed for them to get those big splash plays to be in a position to tie the game and then eventually win it in overtime. They had every ability to separate with the way that they were constantly pressuring Garrett Nussmeier. They were getting after him. And because they couldn't finish in the red area, they couldn't finish in the red zone, that was what allowed them to stick around, and they only scored 26 points. They had plenty of opportunities. I'm trying to really quickly pull up like what their red zone no, they don't have that stat on ESPN. But it felt like they had so many trips in the red zone that they weren't able to finish, where they just completely had weird, bonkers, goofy play calling that did not pan out to successful drives. And the amount of pressures, God, these ESPN stats suck. Normally it tells you how many sacks there were, but whoever marked this game's a freaking jackass. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, neither offense could get momentum because it was injury fest out there tonight. Thoughts and prayers with every player that went down, respectfully for those with legitimate injuries. But the fake injury game tonight was ridiculous. It was absurd. The boos every single time a player goes down. That's a bad precedent to set, Lane. It's bad to have players that might be legitimately be cramping, maybe a tore something, sprained an ankle. They're getting booed because you want to stop LSU's offensive momentum, which there really wasn't much of. And then LSU started getting in on it. It's such an ugly part of the game. I can't stand it, but maybe it's effective per their analytics. Analytics say it's Nussy season, and he decided to have a big boy throw at the end of the game. And that's all that matters.
I don't know if I would call it Nussy season because he went 22 of 51 for
Nussy
3
season.
and 2 interceptions. Look, just to reiterate before we move on to the next game, though, they're out of the playoff picture. I mean, you can't have 2 losses at the halfway point of the year. The Kentucky loss completely kills them. They could have had a close loss to LSU to this degree and still found a way to sneak in with 3 losses being 9-3. But I find it hard to believe that they're going to finish 9-3 with a strong enough of a resume that is going to allow for them to be in that playoff conversation. Their remaining stretch of games that they now have, Oklahoma coming up, who's probably going to drop out of the rankings. They play Arkansas. No way that they're going to beat Georgia the way that their offense played today, although Georgia allowed 31 points to be scored by Mississippi State. They've got future home of Lane Kiffin, Florida.
Oh, come on.
And then Mississippi State. Are you good over there?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. It's a midnight show. All right. We're fighting through.
I find it hard to believe, though, with that remaining stretch, that they don't drop another game that they're not supposed to and finish this game 9-3 with a mediocre resume.
LSU's not that good. All right. I don't even like them being ranked 13. They're not. I know they had the injury bug. I know. I can't believe even Kyron Lacey stayed on the field today. He had an insane knee bend trick that was disgusting.
Yeah, I thought he tore his knee out.
Couldn't believe it. But
I yelped when I saw that.
This LSU team is not that good to have a walk-off winner.
They're starting quarter again. This is my whole point, is that they allowed a team that played like absolute shit.
Yeah.
Didn't block well. Their quarterback had a litany of just bad throwing decisions, the 2 interceptions, and you allowed him to hang around the whole game. That's bad coaching. It's bad performance by your coaching staff that your team isn't locked in enough to finish when you're outplaying them in every other facet of the game.
Yeah, it's awful. Ole Miss out of the conversation. LSU hanging around. They're going to be the hangnail all season that just takes bites out of the apple, and at the end, or maybe we're looking at an Ole Miss team with 8 wins like, oh my God, are they legit? They're not, but they keep on beating up on these suck-ass teams that just let them get away with one. And they're going to have a really good record in a couple weeks. And you're just going to have to sit there and wonder how it happened.
I'm convinced that is the final nail that pushes Lane Kiffin to Florida. But that is a separate conversation for a different show. Moving on to the outcome of Oregon versus Ohio State. I really thought Ohio State was going to have this one, man. Going on the road, the noise seemingly was a little too much for them earlier. There were a bunch of false starts. There was a delay of game on a punting situation. The biggest surprise is a passing attack that was a little slow to get going and to hit its rhythm in the first few games. It looked pretty messy against Michigan State. They worked the Ohio State secondary. They completely worked Denzel Burke, who was supposed to be a potential first-round pick, who we've discussed a ton on the show on the first team, or on this channel rather, on the first team. And Tez Johnson, more specifically Evan Stewart, they bodied him. They could complete any pass that they wanted to in that direction. And Will Stein had the most big balls decision just to say, this guy can't cover. He's supposed to be good. We're just going to keep going after him. He can't keep up with our small, shifty guys. It's too much. And then it all comes down to, Sean, one of the weirdest, bad, terrible final drives that I've ever watched. I have been I have been too realistic on Will Howard, and I have not been given my credit for the level of realism that I have pushed on him. Every time that I've said that he is fine, he's slightly above average, he gets the job done, I have been pushed back as being critical. But what we found out today is that when you ask him to make some big boy throws and some difficult decisions, he makes mistakes. And he also doesn't connect. He's the king of the 5-yard out that gets you short of the sticks. And that whole entire final drive was him playing way too safe and conservatively, to the degree that this man scrambled. He scrambled with 4 seconds left up the middle, not out of bounds, up the middle, and slid. Like that was the best possible decision. Throwing the ball away was a better decision. Total bungling by Ohio State. Talk about a team who blew it.
Yeah, the Ohio State passing game, first off, their design is so weak. And maybe it's because of the limitations of the quarterback. On the final drive, the one time that they do go aggressive downfield when they need it, it's a really good pass and it's a completion. I'm not going to take that away from him. That was a big boy throw. But they limit him maybe because they know that he can't do it consistently. Will Howard to 5 and out. All we did tonight was watch Ohio State's offense go 5 and out, and we saw like 21 combined carries between Henderson and Judkins. Flip that around, pal. That you can't have those two incredible running backs splitting under 25 carries. Gross, disgusting play calling just so we can get 5 yards through the air and not get the run game going. How else were you going to beat a defense? Oregon was going to sit in their zone, grind you out all game, and end up winning. And the Ohio State incompetence at the end, the Will Howard play is twice as gross because on the play prior, Dan Lanning had 12 men on the field with the game on the line out of a timeout. That is negligence, and you let him off the hook for that. You can't have coaches get bailed out because your quarterback decides to slide in the middle of the field and has no awareness of the clock when it's going through his head. You had 6 seconds, Howard. You had 6 seconds. 1,000, 2,000. I don't have a decision yet. Throw it away. You have a timeout in your pocket. throw it the hell away. Now, Oregon's offense did really well. Dylan Gabriel, welcome to the party. You showed up in a big way, 340 yards, 2 touchdowns throwing, and 1 on the ground. The rushing touchdown was great. So Oregon play was really legit. This was a great game all in all. But the last sequence leaves both sides of fans with a very bitter taste in their mouth because they know that they both got away with one.
2 things here with Ohio State. One, this is going to bother Oregon fans. It's a cliche that's brought up a lot and one that we bring up on this show a lot. It's hard to beat a good team twice. So this might be to Ohio State's benefit that when they're both going to play each other in the Big Ten championship game. This is set up the trajectory for that to happen. The way that Penn State played today, which we're going to get to in a second, does not reflect that they're going to be in that Big Ten conversation. But if they end up facing off with one another, Ohio State does have that benefit of the doubt. I'm not ready to do the total panic meter, yell about, hey, Ryan Day's cooked. He can't win the big games. There's still a lot of the season left. The playoff is still right around the corner. If there's somebody that's going to go on an unexpected, ridiculous playoff run after winning the Big Ten championship game to win a national title, it's Ryan Day. But I got to give and spend the time here giving the flowers to Dan Lanning, who had been questioned if he could win the big game. That was one thing that was brought up a ton last year. He has faltered significantly as a young head coach in his first seasons coaching in college football, where especially last year, he couldn't beat Washington on the road, and then he couldn't beat Washington in the Pac-12 championship game when it was an expectation where he was supposed to get back in the circumstance and the metaphorical math that I just brought up a second ago, or the hypothetical math that I just brought up a second ago. Him to get this game is huge for his development as a coach and his steps forward and his progression into being one of the brightest minds in the game. I think that he has proven that this Oregon team right now deserves to be number 1. But here's one thing, though, that I think is clear. That number 1 crowning does not mean anything because it can change on a week-to-week basis. It continues to remind us of 2007, where I think the number 1 spot changed hands continuously. So Oregon has to finish the season strong, and they can't have any missteps.
I leave both of these teams in the top 5. It was overwhelmingly, we're nitpicking a lot. That's what we do on the show. It was a great game. It was a great matchup. Both teams met the occasion. I still have Texas as my clear number 1 through this week. I know this is a massive game.
Oregon has right now the best resume. They beat the best G5 team and they beat Ohio State.
Yeah, I gotcha. Texas's dismantling today was too impressive for me.
But okay, we got to talk about that game. I wasn't really super impressed. I think that they beat up on a team with a freshman quarterback and Quinn Ewers was rusty as shit.
Yeah, I think he was semi-good today.
Okay.
He was fine, but the defense, okay. Regardless, I'm not knocking either of these teams or overreacting to them falling or being a team that can't get it done. It was exciting football. Both teams played well, and it was a good drama-filled game. That's what we want as fans. We want a lot of conversation afterwards about a Jeremiah Smith offensive pass interference, which was clearly an offensive pass interference. Ohio State fans, get over yourselves. You know you're being overreactionary. You know you're just looking for something to complain about. You lost the game fair and square. Blame it on your quarterback. Blame it on your coach. Jeremiah Smith pushed off. I'm not dropping either of these teams. If anything, I would flip them. Oregon 2, Ohio State 3.
I want to stand in the Big Ten, Sean. Penn State versus USC. This game was a headache because USC had every single capability to win this football game. Like, they were out athleting them, which is crazy to say with how talented this Penn State roster is. And what I mean by that, there were a lot of plays where skill players for USC were just running past Penn State players. They looked like their feet were stuck in mud. Thanks for covering Penn State, by the way. That's a complete side point.
I'm with you.
Yeah, thanks for taking my bet and completely screwing me over here.
Look, if one of us is going to lose, we're both going to lose. Thank me for winning your team another game. Thank me for winning them another game.
To get back to what we're talking about here with Penn State versus USC. Did you write down the timestamp for that, by the way?
Oh, yeah, I'll get it.
Okay. Where was I? This game, though, with Penn State and USC, Sean. Penn State, I give them a lot of grace because of the difficulty. And what a lot of people were tweeting and saying during this game was that when it looked like USC was going to win it, was that USC having to travel all the way there is such a significant advantage, and that we should always pick against these East Coast teams that have to go cross country to play. I'm against that. I'm completely against that. I don't think that is completely, totally true. I think that better football teams will eventually prevail. And we saw that here with Penn State. They were really sluggish. They were sloppy. Drew Aller had a really bad first half, and then eventually they woke up. They recovered. Their bodies suddenly found themselves getting into rhythm. I think that this Penn State team is going to be fine. I don't think they're good enough to beat Ohio State, but I certainly think, and I feel like you're going to sit in this camp, that there's going to be a lot of overreaction to the Penn State performance.
I'm sick of them. USC they lost to Minnesota, who is a middling Big Ten team. Not on the rise, not on the fall, just chilling in the Big Ten. Chilling in Cedar Rapids. That's what Minnesota's doing. USC lost to them, and you let USC put 30 points on you. You let USC just start trouncing you. It starts getting out of hand, and you got to start lucking and willing your way to it with a shocking performance from tight end Tyler Warren, who you need to have wide receiver tight end game of the year, 244 yards, 17 catches, and a crazy-ass touchdown. You need all this madness to happen for you to beat USC with Lincoln Riley, whose seat has been hotter than it ever has been at USC, by 3 points. Penn State is exactly who I thought they were. They're the 3 team in the Big Ten. They will always be the 3 team in the Big Ten. They're not good enough to challenge Ohio State after tonight. They're not even close to being able to challenge Oregon after tonight. Keep on beating the other Big Ten teams. That's fine. You're going to continue to let down your team. You're going to keep on coming out flat under James Franklin. The defense keeps on starting slow and sluggish. It's not a legit resume win for me. This is a fraudulent, a crazy win that does not, I take no stock in for Penn State. It's a win. It's a win. It's a win. But with all the context that I've had around them and James Franklin for the last couple of years, it doesn't matter to me. It's totally irrelevant. Penn State should not be in the top 5, in my opinion. They should be at like 8 or 9.
That's where they're going to probably end up resting in the playoff picture. They're going to be a playoff team because they're just 3/4 good enough to be a playoff team. And that's the epitome of everyone discussing, well, if the expanded playoff existed over the past 10 years, they would have always been in that picture. They always would have been in that convo. But yeah, I'm giving them grace for having to have traveled that far and to deal with that. But I do slightly agree on, I never thought that this Penn State team was like top 3, 4, or even top 5 worthy. I thought they were top 10 worthy. I thought they were stout enough on defense with enough athletes at certain positions, especially like Abdul Carter being as good as he is at defensive end, and that Drew Aller was strong enough of a quarterback. He's probably one of the better quarterbacks of the top 10 teams right now. On top of this, their run game's great, but they just don't like really finish and play at that high level that you would want from a team that is worthy of a national championship conversation. They're not in that top 5 clip of this is one of the best teams in the country. They're into the bucket of they're just really good. They're just really strong. They're really effective.
Here's what I'll say. A positive for Penn State that Joe and I note week in and week out, the offensive line motion. I can't get enough of it. The creativity with the offensive line, I will always give you a nod for that. Their offense is trying to take chances and be creative, which I do appreciate. But they don't get up enough for these big games. They don't do it. And I'm not going to buy in anymore. I bought in last year, big time Penn State mark over here, saying, oh, this might be the year. It's not. Has Aller improved? Yeah, he has improved. And sometimes I see some throws that do wow me. But for the most part, it's the same old Penn State team rolling out there and coming up a foot too short.
Let's jump on over, Sean, to the Red River rivalry. Texas completely dominates Oklahoma. Felt very similar to the Michigan game, the way that they won this, where there was a clear separation. There was a clear difference in the quality of these two teams in their 34-3 win. And they just started to snowball. And then eventually it was chunk play after chunk play. And then boom, the game was over. Probably the most boring game of the day, which
I was a snoozer.
It was a complete snoozer. I think, though, that it is worth noting that Quinn Ewers did look a hair rusty for the beginning portion of this game. And I think throughout most of it, he was a bit rusty. He was not on point, which is fine. There's no overreaction to that. It was fine because he's coming off of an ab strain. He didn't play for multiple weeks. Oklahoma's defense It's physical. It's swarming. They were getting in his face. They were getting some good early pressures. The interception that he threw was bad. Again, clearly looks out of rhythm. He will have time to string together enough performances to hit that real rhythm when the playoff time comes around. But the Georgia game is right around the corner, and he has to be firing on all cylinders. He can't play the way that he did today against Oklahoma, against Georgia, against the defense that's going to play a lot better than what they did against Mississippi State. Don't want to hear anyone jumping and saying that, oh, look at how they did against Mississippi State. That's not the version of Georgia that we all know will show up when they play against Texas. Outside of that, I was really impressed by their run game because of the issues and the lack of depth that we know that they currently have, because of the injuries that they suffered at the beginning of the year. It didn't really show up against Michigan, but there were a ton of huge plays in the run game for Texas. That's going to pay dividends later on if they can stay as impactful.
I think your Ewers take is fair. I wouldn't disagree that he was rusty. And I know when we've seen Ewers come back from injury prior, it does take a game for him. Last time he came off of injury, I think he had 2 picks and they still won. So it's how he gets back into the rhythm, make a couple bad decisions, learn from them, and get ready for a next big game. And I love my ideal for keeping Texas as my number one is because I can't wait to see how Texas performs as number one versus Georgia, coming off of a scalding win, putting up 41 points, almost unheard of for this snooze fest of an offense. But that's going to be a massive game for them. And I think this Texas defense is pretty underrated. They give up 237 yards today. And I will contribute that a lot of that is Oklahoma's quarterback issues so far. Week 7 is the opposite of where you want to be deciding what quarterback should be starting for you if you are a team that is currently ranked. It's not a good look. It's not what you want to be dealing with in week 7. Week 7, hey, we got our guy and we're going to start rolling. We're going to start stringing wins together and try to get back in the conversation. Oklahoma, cooked like that goose. And I'm also big on this win, Joe, because these bitter, hateful rivalries, we know crazy stuff happens. We just know it does. Like today, Florida, Tennessee was off the rails. It shouldn't have been off the rails. Tennessee's a better team. Tennessee has a better quarterback, coach, running game, defense, but it was close because crazy stuff happens in these games. Texas, Oklahoma, crazy stuff's supposed to happen, and they go beat them by 31 points. That tells me a lot of what I need to know about Texas being a team that has depth and takes themselves seriously, and Oklahoma, who has identity issues and does not have the proper depth.
That's fair credit to give because of that game and how consistently close it is, even when one team on one side's bad and the other one's really good. It's always typically a one-score game. Like the stat that I kept referencing was that 9 of the last 10 matchups that they have, it was a one-score game. So for them to win and separate that much when Oklahoma might have had a lot of offensive issues and injuries, their defense is still really talented. To drop 34 on them, it is a very impressive day. I just need to know, okay, here's my issue with Texas, and this is going to get a pissy response. I just don't know if beating Michigan and Oklahoma when they're down as bad as they are and with the issues that they have at quarterback is as impressive as a lot of people are going to make it out to be.
I don't think it's unfair for you to point out. You won't be the only one pointing out.
Like they look
that
nice.
Michigan
they
has
look
been
nice. They're ranked wins, but
yeah,
are they real ranked wins?
They are real ranked wins. Michigan's quarterback situation has been an albatross, similarly to Oklahoma's. But they still have won games or had credibility at that point to be ranked, and it's still football at the end of the day. Hacky coach speak answer, but I'll take a ranked win because we're going to see these teams at the end of the year start fleshing through their ranked wins, and some are going to get glossed over. Some of these games from today that were way closer than they needed to be will just be glossed over because of the pedigree of the program. So I am going with the default Texas big win still with the situation. Obviously, though, next week is the big kicker for them. That's when the cream rises. That's when the rubber meets the road. All of the analogies that you could make. It's Texas, Georgia. That's when it gets decided.
Sean, Alabama had a very, very rough outing against South Carolina, a game that looked like early that they were going to separate and their offense was going to take over. Their pissed off defensive line was going to bounce back after the bad game against Vanderbilt. But no. The final score ends up being 27-25. There were so many perfect instances for Alabama to completely, actually both these teams, neither one of them wanted to win the football game. There was just a hilarious turn of events that led to the back and forth of this game where neither team wanted to take this game and just finish it, just end it out. And I talk about I think it was a throw to Jeremy Bernard where it was a mesh corner concept where they really only needed to connect on the mesh. So really all they needed to do was run the football and then close out the clock. But instead, you hit Bernard in the corner of the end zone. It's big, it's exciting, it's momentum building, and you give them the ball back. They march down, they score, failed 2-point conversion, recover the onside kick, and then after the recovered onside kick, the interception by Lenora Sellers. Messy, horrible, bad game. If South Carolina had any competence or capability of a good team, if they even resembled a good team, Alabama would have lost. Alabama 1,000% would have lost. It is ridiculously insane to come back down to earth after the Georgia game. I legitimately don't know what this Alabama team is. I don't. And I hate the people that jump to the conclusion that say, well, Georgia's not very good and Alabama's worse than them, so they both shouldn't be top 10 teams. That's ridiculous. Like, that is a complete overreaction. It's fine to sit here and say that Georgia is still a great team and that they haven't played great over the past few weeks. And I think that applies here for Alabama. I just don't know with their remaining stretch of games if they are going to play this messy and mistake-filled, if they're going to be able to finish. Because right now, bad offensive line play, bad decision-making on offense. Jalen Milroe's taken 2 steps backward. They can't tackle. All of those things are going to keep catching up to them, things that look like that they weren't problems in the first couple of weeks.
Alabama's defense is suspect. And the offense isn't potent enough to break away. You can have one or the other if you really want to. If you want to keep skating by, you can't have both of those scenarios happening for your team. Jalen Milroe, 2 interceptions today. That's rough. I know he had 2 rushing touchdowns, a passing touchdown. I think 2 back-to-back games where he's under like 225 passing yards. He had 209 today. Alabama may be truly fraudulent because I am not buying the hype of the middle-of-the-road SEC team. I'm not buying the hype of the Kentucky is better than we thought they were. South Carolina is better than we thought they were.
I said that to Blake, and Blake got mad at me. They're not good teams.
They're not that good. They're not
shit teams.
They're not that good to get to scrape by with 2 points versus South Carolina. The Vanderbilt thing happens once in a million. Okay, I can make sense of a crazy thing happening in football. Joe and I have seen hundreds of crazy things happen in football that just you can't make sense of it. But after that, to turn in a performance like this, to come out flat, to let South Carolina get momentum, and this is where it started. There's 4 minutes left in the second quarter, and Alabama, you could tell, was already thinking about halftime. And they forgot that they had to close out the quarter, go to half with a 14-point lead. Maybe you give up and concede a field goal. I don't love it, but it's still a 2-score game. They let them right back in it at half, and it was a 1-score game going back, and South Carolina's getting the ball coming out of halftime. They punched out. You could see that they took 4 minutes off, and they're not good enough to coast on their laurels. They're not good enough to do that. So DeBoer needs to let them know that. Hey, guys, you're not 2014 Bama. You're not 2011 Bama. There's not Reggie Ragland back here to come bail you out. Clinton Dix isn't going to have a crazy interception to bail you out. You need to play a full 60 minutes, and they're incapable of doing that at this point. I think that's their main problem.
It kind of chalks up to first-year coach at a new program, and obviously Kalen DeBoer is not a first-time head coach, to clarify that before anyone jumps on that. He has been a fantastic coach everywhere he's been, but the first year that you're taking over a program, you're going to have miscues. You're going to have bad games, and the issues that they're having seems like it's just a lack of connection, lack of chemistry. You've had a bunch of guys that were recruited by Nick Saban that didn't know that they were going to be coached by Kalen DeBoer. A lot of them decided to stay. They decided to stick around. Some of them have been playing great, but it just feels like that there's a disconnect between his team and a group of guys that were recruited and bought in to being there for another man to lead them. That's what it feels like to me. It just feels like that they're not on the same page. And maybe this thing just doesn't really hit the ground running until next year. I believe that they still have 9-3 in their system, and they're going to have a really good 9-3 resume. I know that sounds weird for me to say after implying that a 9-3 Ole Miss team wouldn't get in. Their resume is going to look a lot worse than an Alabama team with the Georgia win. If they beat Mizzou, they're in position. And if they're able to beat Tennessee, which Tennessee looks like a mess, that's going to be a slop fest of a game. They're in position with a 9-3 record.
I really like the recruited by Saban playing for DeBoer, because it really feels like a bunch of players that are having to listen to their stepdad. I can eat candy before dinner. You're not my dad. My mom's going to defend me. I'll be fine. And then they can always, if something happens, they can always default to, this wouldn't happen with Saban. I came here to play for Saban. It's not clicking right now. This isn't the guy I came to play for. Like, it feels like built-in excuses for an Alabama team who historically under Nick Saban would scoff and be disgusted at the idea of trying to make excuses. So it's a completely different tone with this team, and they're not, I don't think they're fully bought in. And they can say they're bought in. You can say the locker room's all behind Kalen DeBoer, and I believe he's a good enough coach to get them there. At this current juncture, it's not that close.
No. Your way does not feel like that they're in that true position yet. And Kalen DeBoer had never taken his team to the great heights that he took them in the first year. It was usually a really promising, nice first year, but because it's Alabama, our expectations are completely flawed and they're diverted, away from what the reality should actually be. Tennessee versus Florida, 23-17. This game goes to overtime. Horrible series of events for Florida in overtime and just completely bungled it away. Smack the third, terrible name for a kicker wearing number 29, missed a field goal that would have given him a 3-point lead. And all Tennessee needed to do was to, plunge on into the end zone. I stand by what I tweeted about Tennessee. It just feels like that the offense doesn't have confidence because they had it the first couple of weeks. We saw what they were, understandably, against bad teams. With the NC State game and the first half against Oklahoma, that was a reality. That was a true reality of what they could have progressed and continued to become. We talked about how it felt like Nico was getting better on a week-to-week basis, but right now he's stagnated and he's taken two steps backward, going 16 of 26 for 169 in an interception. They feel like that they're lacking confidence. Dylan Sampson's playing his ass off, but it just feels like the passing attack does not have the same cohesiveness that it needs to succeed and to flourish the way that we thought that they were going to. And if a quarterback is lacking confidence and he's doubting himself, you're going to have these types of performances against a team that you're supposed to blow out at home.
It's a tale of two teams so far this season, and Nico kind of is starting to remind me or give me shades of, remember when Trevor Lawrence had never lost a football game in his life and he went to the NFL and he went 1-15.
Yeah.
And, it's like, okay, Trevor Lawrence, he always gives off this cool, calm demeanor. I think it did rattle him a little bit because he didn't make that next step afterwards. And I'm really hoping that doesn't happen with Nico because I think he is an immense talent. And I think this Tennessee team, if they keep winning and they have some good wins, they can be fun. They can be legit. They have defensive pieces that can keep them in games with anybody. They have offensive weapons that can torch any defense. Just get it together. You have to have a short memory. And not only if you're a stupid offensive guard that had a holding call, you need a short memory. But if you're a quarterback of an offense, obviously remember every play, but try not to remember the bad outcomes. You have to flush it immediately. I think it's just a young quarterback thing where he's getting caught up in those webs of and not even a confidence thing, but maybe it's a paralysis by overanalysis situation where Nico feels like a feel guy. Like if he starts feeling the game, he's untouchable. But if he loses that feel and he's not in not even a flow state, but a half flow state, then this Tennessee offense plateaus and they can't get anything done. Thank God they have Sampson. 3 touchdowns tonight. He carried them. He's a fantastic running back, and the interior 3 offensive linemen for Tennessee paved the way for him. He's fantastic. They're great. But they got away with one tonight versus Florida, which is crazy to say. Florida wins this game. Napier's there for another year, and college football looks incredibly different. But it was a complete mess from Tennessee. Flush it, burn the tape. This might be one of those games Monday. Hey, we're not going to watch the same play over twice. We are just going to watch it once, burn it, and move on to the next week.
That Alabama-Tennessee game is going to be really telling of which team is in the better. That game sounded so fun weeks ago, and now I am loathing.
That's a mental illness game right there. Who's more mentally ill or more mentally tough, I guess is how I should phrase it.
Sean, let's before we wrap up here, let's hit the board on just a couple of games that we were paying attention to but didn't really get full eyes on. Iowa State, West Virginia beat West Virginia 28-16. BYU beats Arizona 41-19. I don't think there's still a clear answer yet who's the best Big 12 program, but I still lean Iowa State because I think that they have the more difficult circumstance of going on the road and dealing with what is a very ruckus environment that's just so brutally tough to compete in. And they just looked super stoic every time that we kind of peered over to what was happening, moving the ball, finishing drives, punching the ball into the end zone. Beck looked pretty strong on connecting with his receivers, Higgins and Noel. Just a strong overall performance, but you do have to give some love to BYU, who smoked what I argue to be one of the most fraudulent projected early season teams. Everyone thought that Arizona was going to jump right in with Brett Brennan, but he's a lame-ass, weak, terrible coach. You hired a guy with a bad record at a freaking G5 school, and I got criticized by Arizona fans for saying it was a lazy, stupid, terrible hire, and he sucks. I'm going to say I think Iowa State's the better Big 12 team.
I really liked Iowa State's win over Iowa. That was a gritty win, early season win where you just really need to get away with one, and they did. West Virginia is their second best win since then. Other than that, it's kind of meh. But yeah, the offense, when they're clicking, they're good. And West Virginia, anybody will tell you it's no fun to play there, and they are legit when they're at home, and those crazy people are acting crazy. BYU, if they can keep it rolling, sure. It's a fun story, I guess. Still waiting for Kansas State. I still have the most investment in the Big 12 in them, I think, just for the offensive power. Really good running back. Avery Johnson, I think, is really a dude. And I wasn't like all in on him so far through the year. I've been more and more impressed with him. And I think they end up on top. They still have my most vested interest, though.
Last one, this was on Friday, 27-19. Arizona State beat number 16 Utah. I think they're getting bounced from the rankings. Dude, I don't know why the hell they started Cam Rising. Cam Rising could not throw. He couldn't throw. They knew that Micah Bernard, no, it's Mekhi Bernard is how they keep saying it, which is weird. His name is like not anywhere near spelled that way. But Mekhi Bernard, they couldn't run the ball. He still had a great game. They knew who was getting it every single time. And we're watching Cam Rising just like grimace because he banged up his ankle at the beginning of the game and his hands messed up. Utah is going to go down as one of the biggest what ifs because of Cam Rising. They've boxed themselves out of the playoff conversation. I find it hard to believe a 10-2 finish. If they just go on some crazy batshit run to finish out the year, that's enough to keep them in the playoff conversation. They've got left TCU, Houston. God, they have back-to-back losses too. TCU, Houston, BYU, Colorado, Iowa State, UCF. If you were able to beat BYU and Iowa State, you arguably would still be in position to compete for the Big 12 championship game in the standings. But wow, that is going to be a tough finish for them.
Well, we know that's what Utah loves to do, is to just find their way in the championship, whether it was the Pac-12 championship. Always just had Utah in it for some reason, with the exception of last year. Just Utah just making a surge, I guess. Joe, is a 29.3 QBR good?
No.
Oh, okay. So Cam Rising with a 29.3. He's been on my get a job list for the past 2 years.
Okay, he was one of the few that was actually still good. He just can't stay healthy.
Look, I gotcha. I've been waiting too long for the bell of the ball to walk down the stairs. All right, I got to go home.
He did walk down the stairs. He walked down the stairs. They won the Pac-12 championship with him, and then he tore his ACL on the final step in the Rose Bowl.
I got to go talk to the three in the corner now. Okay, you did not come.
Who's the three in the corner?
The three in the corner is just a generic three in the corner that you got to go. I'm already out here at the ball. All right, I'm already out here. I can't stand here waiting like a jerk.
Are you implying that like BYU is the 3 in the corner?
Oh God. Yeah, maybe. Maybe BYU is the 3 in the corner that I got to go home with. Just sitting there. Oh God, everyone's looking at me. Lights are getting bright now. All right, final call, everybody. Time to get your final shot. $3 shot. Get out of here. Get me out of here.
Yeah, not a good series of events for Utah. It is 12:52. We'll talk to you folks later. At Joe DeLeone at Sanderson Radio. I'm going to go to bed. Hack City Pod.